where we discuss everything you ever wanted to know about business but you were afraid to ask. How do I start my business? How do I raise the finance? How do I grow my business? Where am I going to find my customers? Join me every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. on Star Radio UK to get all the information and tips that you need to become a successful entrepreneur and become financially free. Remember, don't let life dictate to you. Rather, put your signature on life.
Get ready for this.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Bebe Means Business Show. By now, you know that this is the show that you need when you want to get information, education, tips, on anything and everything to do with business and entrepreneurship, and how you can become a successful entrepreneur and become financially free. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time, where have you been? I'm your host, Bebe Clement, and I run a group of small companies. I'm also the author of How to Go from Employee to Entrepreneur, which I'm very proud to say has sold nearly 6,000 copies. Just want to give you a minute to connect with me online. Many of you phone in and say, how can we connect with you outside of the show? So if you are a Twitter kind of person, if that's the medium that you like the most, then my Twitter handle is @BebeClement. That's @BebeClement. And if you prefer Instagram, it's Bebe_Clement. And if you're more serious and you like LinkedIn, then if you just type in my name, I'll definitely come up. But once again, I just want to welcome you to the Bebe Means Business Show. Now, today I'm going to do something slightly different, and I'll tell you the reasons why I'm doing this particular episode. I think it's a given, really, that Sub-Saharan Africans, and I know that the majority of the people that listen to this show are black, Sub-Saharan Africans tend to be intrinsically entrepreneurial. We have a natural connectivity towards entrepreneurship, or leaning towards entrepreneurship. We're very good at starting wealth creation processes, but our endeavors seem to remain small. It's very unusual for a black business to grow, or to even have a growth mentality or a growth plan. And often we don't have an exit strategy. Most companies have never thought about the fact that they might one day want to sell their company. So the same kind of short-sightedness is something that occurs in other financial endeavors that we get ourselves involved in. Now, I'm a strong believer that wealth is supposed to be built. Each generation should be building upon the financial legacy of the previous one. But for some reason, that doesn't seem to happen a lot in the black community. I mean, there are exceptions to every rule, of course, but in the main, that doesn't seem to happen. It's almost like each generation has to start again from scratch. I mean, when I think about my home country, Nigeria, I can think of some very wealthy families and particular names, which I won't mention, of people who were very, very wealthy back in the day. And when they died, it seemed like everything that they worked for kind of died with them. There's one particular person that comes to mind. He was a presidential aspirant, and he had his finger in lots of pies and had lots of businesses, and he was a household name. But just a few years after his death, none of his companies can be found. And so I thought today I'd do a program on how to protect and preserve your wealth. As you know, I'm a Christian, and the Bible says that when it comes to wealth creation, a wise man leaves an inheritance, not even just for his children, but for his children's children. In other words, when it comes to building wealth, we're supposed to be thinking generationally. We've got to move away from the okay, that's no, we got to move away from that and start thinking of how we can leave a legacy for generations to come. So welcome for those of you who are just joining. Today we're going to be looking at how to protect and preserve your wealth for generations to come. And to help me discuss this topic, I have invited two very special people along. I have better me, more learned than me, wiser than me, that I can learn from on this show, and you can learn from as well. And so today I have the pleasure of welcoming Remy Ayala and Sydney Sonny to the show. I'll let them introduce themselves. Remy, if you'd like to tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, Bebe. Thanks for having me on your show. So I'm a lawyer and a speaker as well as an author. I specialize in wills for high net worth clients as well as people in business owners. So your target audience are my ideal clients. So I'm trying to get myself in in the frame, and so so that's what I specialize in. I also do estate planning, because I don't see wills as just something to be dealt with in isolation. It should be dealt with as a proper plan, and I'll talk more about it, but that's what I do, and I've had over 20 years experience in doing this, and I'm glad to say saved millions of pounds in inheritance tax for my clients through estate planning.
Brilliant. You're welcome to the show.
Thank
Sydney,
you.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sydney Sani. I'm an author, speaker, and also a specialist protection advisor. Basically, what that is we give advice to clients in the area of personal protection. We talk about things like life insurance, critical illness, income protection, injury, and things like that. And also, one of the things I do is we also help our clients to put their insurances, especially the life insurance, in trust to save them, from inheritance tax, their estates, and things like that. So, in terms of estate planning, yes, we do that. It's something I love helping people do. I've already spoken with a couple of people this morning, so so that's what I do.
Okay. All right, you're both very, very welcome to the show. Okay, so let's get the show on the road. Now, about 12 years ago, I started a networking group called Black Businesses. It's a networking group, obviously, as the name depicts, for Black business owners within the UK. And we're currently about 6,300 strong. And we can be found on Facebook. But prior to COVID hitting, what we used to do was we used to have these quarterly networking breakfasts, and then we'd invite a speaker along who would, educate us or teach us about some particular area of business. And I always used to feel so sorry for the people who used to come along and speak about what you guys are going to be speaking about today, wills and life insurance and things like that, because I watched the body language of the delegates, and you'd see people begin to yawn, their eyes would glaze over, they'd go to the toilet and all that kind of thing. But now in the era of us being, I think the new buzzword is woke, now in the era of Black people being woke, do you think that has changed? Are people more aware of the need and the understanding for wealth protection procedures, or is it same old, same old? Remy, if you'd like to go first.
I think that I'm finding more and more that people are more happy to have a conversation, because it all starts with a conversation, and previously it was a difficult thing to get going, and I think that once people engage in the process, they actually are happy to carry on. They're happy to deal with it and understand the peace of mind that comes with dealing with these sort of things. But it's just having that or starting that conversation, and I think that people are much more happy to engage in the conversation. I don't know if Sydney thinks the same in his own profession.
Yes, I mean, last year I remember during the lockdown, it was that happened in March, I think, and what we actually noticed, all of us had a Zoom meeting. Normally we would have a regional meeting, and I'm a manager with my company. It's called Unishore. So my managing director actually, our business actually went up. We actually did better during the lockdown, because like you said, people were more willing to discuss the issues of protection, and a lot of people have actually died, and these have opened their eyes, so they were more willing to have that conversation, about planning, and yes, it's getting better,
Okay. All right, so that's good to hear. in one regard, it's good to hear that it's no longer such an uphill task. Remy said something interesting. She said once that conversation starts, then people are willing to go with it. Outside of COVID, because COVID has kind of like forced the issue, if you know what I mean. Beyond COVID, do you think that this willingness to have the conversation is here to stay, or are things likely to revert back, or do you not know? Remy?
I think that COVID has changed everything. I think people are much more aware of their mortality and thinking about that in a more conscious way now. I think that the only thing is that the pattern has been in the past that it's older people who will engage in these conversations. And when I talk about older people, I'm talking about maybe, people in their 70s. I would like to see people in their 40s and, even in their 30s engaging in these kinds of conversation. And I think that that's what we need to start working towards, because if you're in your 30s, 40s, and you're talking about this with your advisors, then you're likely to have parents who are actually also need some advice, and to introduce that topic to them if they haven't done anything about it. And I know in the past, I would find, the idea of a son or daughter saying to their parent, Mom or Dad, you need a will. It's like, why? Are you planning to kill me? So I think it's changing now, and I think that I would like to see, that side of that sort of age group engaging much more in this in the process.
Yeah.
Yes, you're quite right. However, what I found out in my own, with doing business, my own business, is people who are actually from 40 upwards, and if they have a family, they're more willing to have that conversation. However, I still find out that people who are actually maybe in their late 20s or their 30s, they still take it as a bit of it's not necessary. They still have that attitude that they are invisible and all of that. But I found out that even when people are below 40, there's a client I did in Peterborough, Loughborough. He's not 40 yet. However, because he has a family, he actually, by the time I had the second call with him, we'd actually decided, and we actually took out the cover, the protection, almost immediately. By the second call, we had closed it. But I have people who are in their 40s, sometimes, I don't know what it is. It's like a self-destructive thing. They postpone. I have a client who has postponed probably about a dozen times now, and I'm like, you can't be too busy with someone else's work to be too busy to take care of yours. So people who generally are like over 40, by the time they're hitting their 40, 41, and you have this conversation with them, and you actually show that you're actually willing to help them, is easier. And so to have that conversation. Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, most people, as you're aware, are employees, and most of them are mainly dependent on a single source of income, i.e. their salary. Now, that's something, for those of you who are regular listeners of this show, something that I frown upon and I discourage, because in these times, I think it's tantamount to economic suicide to be dependent on a single source of income. The average millionaire has about 7 different sources of income at any given time. So how we think we're going to survive on just one is beyond me. But that we are where we are. In relation to COVID, and this question goes to Laddie, in relation to COVID, what can people do to protect themselves against critical illness and stuff like that? Like you said, people are more aware now of their mortality. You don't have to be 80 to drop dead. People are dropping dead in their 30s, 20s.
Absolutely.
So what can we do to protect ourselves against illness?
Yes, one of the things I do, the very first thing I actually discuss with my clients, whether they're self-employed or whether they're on a salary, is I first of all talk about income protection, and this is why. whether you can pay for your life insurance cover or whether you can pay for your critical illness cover, it's because you have an income. So let's protect your income first. Do you understand? And that's one of the first things. If you have an income, right, protect your income. Why? Because you have an income to protect. Everything else rests on that. So whether you are employed or whether you are self-employed, you should be looking at doing what is called an income protection kind of.
What does that look like?
Basically, income protection protects 65% of your gross earnings. That's what it does. So, but if you're self-employed, it protects 65% of your after profit. You know, what you make, your profit actually. So, for example, if someone works in, for example, XYZ care home, okay, and earns, let's say he's a manager, a care home manager, £30,000 a year, and after 3 months, if he's ill, right, the care home says in his contract, we're going to pay you your full pay after 3 months. But after 3 months, we will not be paying you any money after 3 months. So what happens is the deferred period is now 3 months. That means after 3 months, the income protection now kicks in, and the client has the option to protect his income to the tune of up to 65%. However, if like yourself, you and I, we are probably, you know, all of this show, we are self-employed. We have the option to say, okay, you know what, I want to protect my income after 4 weeks. Okay, so that is how income protection works. So it pays you a benefit if you are unable to work due to illness or injury. But what does critical illness do? It basically,
sorry, before you went to critical illness, can I just ask, does this affect any state benefits that such people might be entitled to?
If they have state benefits, it's the only state benefit when it comes to income protection now is probably statutory sick pay. Okay, it's statutory sick pay. So for how long? You see my point? So after it doesn't affect any other thing. The statutory sick pay is very limited in the sense that, I don't know if you know how much it is. It's like £30 a week. All right. I mean, how long can you survive on on that? So it doesn't affect
Okay.
Doesn't affect that.
That's cool. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Remy, I'm going to delve into a bit deeper into what you do. Now, I read something the other day, and it said if I die intestate, the government can potentially take up to 40% of all that I own. I mean, that scared the crap out of me, to be honest, when I read that. First of all, is that true? And two, what does that mean to die intestate?
Yeah. So, first of all, to die intestate means dying without a will or dying without a valid will, because some people do make a will and it turns out not to be valid. So it's dying without a valid will. Now, as with everything, there is a little bit of truth in that, but not in the statement that you made, but not entirely. And so everybody has up to £325,000 that they can give away free of inheritance tax. So that's the starting point. And then above that, there's a 40% tax charge, and that's for inheritance tax. So, but it's not quite so simple, because there are other things that are taken into account. For example, gifts that you make in the 7 years before your death, some of them can be taken into account if they're not exempt. So it is a complicated topic. Sounds very simple, but it's complicated, and that's why I talk about a plan, getting advice, from a suitably qualified lawyer, from somebody like Sydney, who deals with financial planning. The two go hand in hand, and it's absolutely important to have a plan. Otherwise, like you said, the government gets the opportunity to take the tax, and it's sometimes actually referred to as a voluntary tax, because if you don't plan, then you're giving money away to the government.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Of course, yeah, if that's what you want to do, fine. I did have a client who said, that's okay. I actually want the government to have the money because, you know, I just feel I owe it to them. That's fine. But, you know, 99.9% of the people that I meet do not want to give away any money that they don't have to.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Interesting. Okay.
It's interesting.
Right. Now, can I just ask, Remy, what does a valid will look like? What must we make sure we don't miss out?
Okay, so a valid will is made by somebody who has the mental capacity to make a will. So they have, you know, there's a specific test that we call a testamentary capacity. So they have to have that mental capacity to make a will. The will has to be signed in the presence of two witnesses, and the witnesses have to sign it by in the presence of the person making the will. A lot of the time, wills will fail because the person didn't get it signed properly. That is a big thing, especially when people choose to do a DIY job. And I'm not knocking it, but often wills fail because it wasn't signed properly. So I get my will, I sign it, I take it along to my neighbor, and I say, oh, can you just sign over here? They sign it, and I take it to the other neighbor on the other side, and they sign it. Not a valid will. So you have to, you know, get proper advice.
Right. Okay, I hope you're listening, guys. It's not just a matter of scribbling something down on a piece of paper and getting someone you know to sign it. There's more to it than that. Okay, Remy, most of our listeners are business owners, as you know. What should they be taking into consideration when making a will? Is there something different that they need to do to protect themselves, or is it just the standard will? Sorry, just a quick one. Can you just sit up, please, because it's oh, thank you. All right, Remy.
Okay, right. So, there are things that business owners need to think about when making a will. The first thing there are lots of things, and I'm just going to put in as much as I can think of. And you should think about in terms of succession planning. You know, you've got a business and you're trying to plan how it should transfer to the next generation or to whoever you want it to transfer to. And so some of the things you need to think about when making the will is, for a start, what are the powers you're going to give to the executors? The executors are the people who will administer the estate and run things. So, for example, the business. A lot of people don't put any extra powers for the executors. So what happens is a forced sale has to be made of the business.
Wow.
And then it's sold at a loss. But if you give those extra powers to the executors, they can actually run the business whilst looking for a sale, or get it to a particular point in time when it is most valuable and able to sell for a higher price. And the second thing is business executors, you know, because most people will say, oh, my children, but have you thought about who will be the best person to look after these assets and run the business whilst you're getting to the point of either sale or distribution? So think about that. The third one I'm going to talk about is business property relief. That's a biggie, and actually so important. There's something that's interesting about inheritance tax. The government, while it wants its, you know, to skin you alive wherever it's possible, they do actually recognize that there's some things that they want to carry on and not be destroyed by tax. And one of them is businesses. And so there's something called business property relief, which means that if your business qualifies for that relief, there'll be no inheritance tax when it's transferred to anybody, to the next generation especially. So if it's, you know, business you've built up, you want it to transfer on to the children, if it qualifies for business property relief, there'll be no inheritance tax. Wonderful. However, if you don't do some proper planning, you could squander that relief and not preserve it. So we, when we create wills for business clients, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, does your business qualify for business property relief? And if it does, here's what we can do to ensure that there's no additional tax to pay in passing it on to the next generation and the next generation. So those are some of the things. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. So I'm I'll wait for you to ask the questions. But yes, there's a lot.
All right. Interesting. I think also there's also an assumption that our children will want the business. And that assumption is often bucked in the end. So I don't think you can afford to presume that your children actually do want the business. And the fact that they may not want the business also has an effect on what they do with it when you die. So just like you said, it's important to plan ahead and actually have that conversation with them. And if they are telling you they don't want it, accept that they don't want it. Listen to what they have to say. Yeah. Okay, now,
sorry, I was just going to say that actually leads me on to another point that I think people should be thinking about. And so, especially with married couples, so let's say you're in business with somebody else, you both started this business together, which is, very often the case for big businesses or very valuable businesses, is that you have somebody else involved in it. Now, what you need to think about is when you pass on, is your wife to go into business with your business partner, because that business partner may be quite upset to suddenly find that they're now in business with your wife. That's not who they expected, or your husband. And so that's something else that you need to think about, and to think about options and how you can create options. And there's a point at which, if that client is speaking to me, I'll send them over to Sydney to look at, the kind of life policies or, shareholder protection that they can put in place to allow the surviving shareholder to buy out the shares of the deceased shareholder. But you have to do it carefully, because if you don't, you lose the business property relief. So like you said, you have to look at, do the children want this business? Does the surviving spouse want the business, to run the business? Or is the intention that they should have the proceeds, but you organize it in such a way that you still get the business property relief, so that there's no tax to pay on those proceeds?
Wow. Okay, guys, we're going to take a short break in a moment, but just before we go, just to let our listeners know that this is a live show and it is interactive. And we want to hear your views on anything that we discuss, or indeed your questions. I know how much my guests charge. Sometimes it's eye-watering. So if you can get that information for free today, I would encourage you to do that. So if you do want to hook us up and ask any questions, our Twitter handle for this program is @StarRadioUK. Or you can text or WhatsApp us on 07539 661 744. That number again, 07539 661 744. And those of you who are watching via Facebook, it's at Facebook Star Radio UK. Just put your questions in the chat, or indeed email us at info@starradiouk, and my producer will pass me that. We're going to take a short break, go and dehydrate a little bit, and we'll see you in a minute. Bye-bye.
Hi everyone, it's your girl Bebe Clement, the author of How to Go from Employee to Entrepreneur, and the host of your weekly business show, Bebe Means Business, the show where we discuss everything you ever wanted to know about business but you were afraid to ask. How do I start my business? How do I raise the finance? How do I grow my business? Where am I going to find my customers? Join me every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. on Star Radio UK to get all the information and tips that you need to become a successful entrepreneur and become financially free. Remember, don't let life dictate to you. Rather, put your signature on life.
Get ready for this.
Okay, welcome back. And for those of you who are just joining us, you are tuned into the Bebe Means Business Show, which is the show where you get all your advice and tips, knowledge and education about anything and everything to do with business and entrepreneurship. And today we're talking about how to preserve and protect your wealth, something that we've acknowledged we don't do very well within the Black community. How to preserve and protect your wealth. And just before the break, my two guests, Remy Ayala and Sydney Sunny, have been really enlightening us. I mean, I've taken in so much already, and even I'm thinking of, okay, there's certain things I'm going to have to go and review. So I'm really glad that both of them are here. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, you have touched on earlier on, but I do think we can speak a bit more to it. Now, I suspect, just like you said, that the average new graduate in his first job does not really rank life insurance or writing a will high on their priority list, let's be honest. But at what stage do both of you think that people should start thinking about this? At least, the initial thoughts. Laddie?
Well, very important. Now, very good question. As soon as, a fresh graduate, let's say a fresh graduate starts working, because in insurance, for example, my son, my children are protected till the age of 21. If they are still in full-time education, like my son, he's going to university this year, so he's protected till age 21. Of course, once he has his first job, once he gets out of university, in fact, one of the things to do is actually to take out an insurance on his behalf and hand it over to him, maybe when he gets married or something. So once you start working, it's not about death, it's also about injury, it's also about critical illness. Younger people are actually dying. They're actually even children are actually having cancer and dying. So once that individual starts working, they should start thinking now about life insurance. And I'll tell you why. When you get in early, your life insurance, your critical illness cover, and your income protection will be very affordable. Why? Because number one, you are young. Number two, you are healthy. You are expected to be healthy, and your risk is smaller. Now, the insurance companies, they look at risk. Okay, if you have ever had an ailment, let's say, for example, if you've ever had a kind of sickness, or maybe you have a high BMI, as you get older, all sorts of things start coming in. They look at that risk and they actually load it. For example, if you have a high BMI, in other words, maybe you are meant to be 85 kilos and you're 100 and something, they will load it and add 50% to that premium. So if you come in early, if you get in early for your critical illness cover, your income protection, your life insurance, let's say you're healthy at 23, 24, 25, you're meant to be healthy. And let's say there's something called a life change benefit. Let's say right now you're 30 something, you're thinking of settling down, your risks have improved, have increased considerably. You're going to take on a mortgage. Now, like one of the insurance companies, they have something called a life change benefit. In other words, if your cover was £100,000 and you're getting married, you want to get a mortgage, you're working at Goldman Sachs, you're earning a lot of money, your first mortgage is maybe 350 or 400,000 pounds. You can actually increase your cover without having any medical underwriting. In other words, they're not going to ask for a report from your GP. However, I have a high net worth client. He earns $150,000 a year, probably about 130 something, 140,000. But he's over 50. He was asking for a high amount of cover, well over 300,000 pounds. You know what the insurance companies did? They're going to send a nurse to him. Please, check this guy's blood, weigh him. Let's make sure that, oh boy, whatever we are covering, let me tell you, they came back and increased his premium. And I called him and he said, you know what, laddie, it's okay. Sydney, it's fine. You know why? His risks have improved, and they removed certain things from his insurance. And so that's why we tell people, get in young, get in when you can. You understand? So when you get in early at 20 something, before that expires, you can take it and take another one and extend it. You understand? Okay. So this is how it works. This is how younger people should be thinking.
Okay. So I think there was something you mentioned in the beginning that I thought was interesting, and I hope that we begin to take these kind of things on. When you said something about when your children are going to get married, you could take out life insurance on their behalf prior to them getting married, and even give it as a wedding present. So you know, this mindset of buying, I don't know, 1,000 sets of glasses or cutlery sets and stuff like that they're not going to use. Invest something that is going to have lasting value to your children and set them up right from the beginning for life.
Absolutely, because
so let's begin to change our mindset and start thinking that way. If you really want your children to have a better kind of life, this is how you need to start thinking. We've got to change our mindset. Remy, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. I think that I'm very much a believer in the use of insurance for creating generational wealth, because this 20-something-year-old just starting out, it may be that he thinks, well, I don't really have anything, I don't need to make a will, I don't earn anything, but this insurance policy could be, you know, really, really valuable. I mean, he might be worth more dead than alive, which sometimes does happen. And so if that policy is written in trust, you can actually, and I'm not trying to speak to your area, Sydney, my area is more the legal part of it. So you could write that policy in trust to ensure that there are some asset protection measures that are included, and also to stop tax being applied to it because it's paid outside of the estate of the person. But what you can do is to restrict the way it can be used by the next generation. So if they're restricted to just the income, then the capital can be used to create more wealth, and you can start using insurance policies to build generational wealth. These are some of the things that people who are really wealthy use, and they can start from a young age, because your young man of 21 that you mentioned, Sydney, can probably afford to get a really valuable policy because they don't have any health issues. I have a couple, an estate I was dealing with, the young children, I think 8 and 7 years old, left a widow. He just celebrated his 40th birthday, died, and his insurance was worth £1.5 million. But because it was written in trust, there was no inheritance tax charge. Now, if it hadn't been written in trust, think about 40% of 1.5 million. Wow. That's the kind of check that the wife would have had to write to HMRC. So it's really important to plan. You know, think of your planning as something you do in the round, you know, in a more holistic way. So see Sydney, see me, or my counterparts, you know, but make it much more holistic, and that way you get the best possible benefit. Of course, if you're getting 1.5 million, even if you're paying 40% of tax on it, it still seems a huge amount. But imagine if you didn't have to pay that 40%. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yes, you're quite right, because you see, one of the things that I just had a training this morning. One of it was trusts. Because a trust is very important, because it saves, number one, 40% inheritance tax. Okay, saves you from that. Of course, you have a threshold of 325,000. Then number two, the issue of probate. A probate lawyer, they charge quite a hefty sum. It's quicker. Once the insurance company has that trust, they will release those funds quicker. And then number three, like you said, it's quicker in the sense that it's more targeted, because as a trustee, the person who puts the trust, is a trustee, and then you choose another trustee, one or two other trustees. But however, you can say, okay, fine, out of these £300,000, this is how much I want this person to have, I want this person to have, I want this person. It's very targeted. So it's a way, like Remy said, a way to build generational wealth. Because, for example, let me give this a typical example. One of my manager over me, I'm also a manager, but he's a senior manager. He actually, went to see a couple who had a multi-million pound property portfolio. So, they were feeling good. It's cool. I mean, if you build up 23 properties, I mean, that's no mean feat, okay? But my manager said, what of inheritance tax? One of the tax liability of these things, why don't you put your insurance, do an insurance to cover all of these risks, and then put it in trust, because whatever happens, they have to get a lawyer like yourself to make sure that portfolio is put in trust, and then upon that as well, put their insurance in trust, so you can see how high net worth people preserve their wealth. So like I was still looking in my office today. These are trust forms for my clients, and I'm like looking through them. I'm going to make copies and send it to the insurance company. And we've always been encouraged, please do trust for your client. I remember, how long it takes for probate to come through. It can take 6 months, 1 year. Yes. One of our clients, my senior manager, one of the clients, one of the accounts, they just paid the insurance because of these trust things. So it took like 12 months. She eventually got the money, but it took a long time. So yes, trusts are very important.
Okay. All right, I think that leads nicely to the next thing I want to speak about, and this is to do with property. Now, I don't know if any of you, or if either of you, saw the recent Bloomberg report on London property in particular, but property in relation to black ownership in the UK. And they found that the median accumulation of wealth over the past decade for black family in the UK is zero, not 1%, not 10%, zero. I almost wept when I read this report. Whereas the average white-led family has about £115,000 by holding property and land. They've accumulated that during the same period. Now, this obviously worries somebody like me, because, as you well know, property is one of the best ways to grow wealth, one of the best ways. Another thing that came out of that report was that only 30%, and I was quite surprised about this, only 30% of black families within the UK own their own property. So, considering the fact that this is one of the best ways in which we can grow our wealth, what active steps can those that own property do to preserve it for the next generation? And can I address that to Remy?
Yes, one of the most important asset preservation tools that we have in our kit is trusts. You can do trusts, lifetime trusts, and you can do will trusts. So it's up to you. There are tax consequences, so people shouldn't think you can just do a trust willy-nilly. There are tax consequences. However, they are still worth looking at, because that is one of the most important ways to prevent wealth erosion. And I call it wealth erosion things like tax, things like divorce, things like financial imprudence, things like bankruptcy. Those are all things that could erode wealth. And of course, the first thing is they're coming for your property. And so if you've managed to find a way to put a ring fence around it, then that does give you a certain, very important protections. And, there are different types of trusts. You can have a trust where somebody is allowed to get the income, but the capital is ring fenced, or it's type of trust where both are allowed, both income and capital are preserved. And so, that's very important. And then the thing to think about as well is where a trust is not available, possibly because the tax consequences are too high. Although most of the time it will be surmountable, but sometimes the tax consequences are too high. And then you have to think, okay, what else could I do? Think about restructuring. So, for example, you might want to restructure and put in some succession planning where you have different categories of shares, and some shares will have voting rights attached to them, and some shares might not. So this is where, of course, the assets are owned within a company. And very often, if people are owning multiple properties, especially for investment properties, they'll sort of own it through a company. So you should think about restructuring so that there are different kinds of trusts, and that way you can start to put in different kinds of shares and ownership attaching to those shares, and you can start to think about gradually passing on some of the shares, but without passing on the control. That means you're you don't have any say anymore in the business. So those are some of the things, but trusts, I would hammer on trusts. Think about it. It may not be suitable for you, but at least have a look at it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to both of you regarding the issue of trust. Again, not something that we talk about a lot, or we consider a lot within our community, but this is what the rich do. This is what the rich do to preserve their wealth. Also, going back to the whole issue of life insurance, I know that in a lot of other communities, the children's first taste of wealth is life insurance. So again, I cannot overemphasize the need for this. And oftentimes, the reasons given for not wanting life insurance is, it costs too much. It costs too much. And guys, we really have to come away from the whole instant gratification kind of lifestyle, because that money that you think costs too much, I know, as you well know, that our culture, if something comes along, somebody has a baby, somebody's child gets married, and something like that, we have no hesitation in laying down double, triple that amount. But whereby we have to invest it in our children's future, suddenly that is an issue. So we've really got to come away from that and start thinking long term, get our priorities right, and start living that way. I want to, still staying on the whole issue about the Bloomberg report as regards property and everything like that. Just something I was thinking about, and I want to see if you can speak to this, either of you can speak to this. The whole idea of us having zero wealth in property, that doesn't just happen. That is not down to market forces. That is a result of strategic policy making. And we also heard last week that the average black employee, I was watching a documentary the other day, and they were saying that the average black employee in the UK is paid 17% less than their white counterparts. In other words, you can be sitting next to your white colleague and be doing the same job, have the same job title and description, and he's getting 17% more. Now, why is that important? I'm not here to debate the whole race thing or anything like that. But why is that important? Because it hinges on your ability to have enough income to invest in property, which in itself will build your wealth. So that's why I'm raising that issue. Do you think the time has come, particularly post Judge Floyd, the whole Black Lives Matter thing and everything like that, where it seems that black people seem to have found their voice? Do you think it is time for us to start demanding some policy protection in relation to protecting our property? Let's start with property. And what I mean is, how things like positive discrimination have helped us in the marketplace. Should we be demanding something like that when it comes to protecting our property? Can I address that first to Remy?
I think that we need to start thinking about how we can help ourselves and start looking at maybe black funds. Funds mean real estate funds that we can set up to specifically target black owners, and there are enough wealthy black people. It's not that you don't have wealthy black people. There are enough wealthy people, and there are enough that are working in the private equity area and the financial services industries. So think about creating black funds that will allow this wealth support, wealth generation, and wealth growth and property investment within the black communities. And I think the issue of earning less, there's so much more awareness that we have in terms of our own personal worth, and I think that post George Floyd, one of the consequences inevitably is that the average person, either of color or from an ethnic minority, is going to recognize their worth, and that they are worth the same as the person sitting next to them. So of course, you must demand what you're worth. You shouldn't accept less than your worth. But in terms of wealth, through property, we've got to enable black and ethnic minorities. In some ethnic minorities, there is a strong wealth growth through property, but in some there isn't. And again, some of the things that I think about is perhaps there is a mindset, and maybe that mindset needs to shift and to refocus on maybe less visible means of wealth, and start thinking more about securing wealth that could support future generations. And this is just a thought. I don't have any metrics for measuring it, but it's just something that occurs to me.
Okay. Yes. Before I just before you speak, I just want to quickly, because I'll forget, I just want to quickly say a couple of things based on what Remy has said. One of the things that I'm hearing from you is that really the cavalry is not coming. So we're going to have to help ourselves in relation to this, and I totally agree. I was playing devil's advocate, but I totally agree. And thankfully, we are beginning to get our act together. I'm pleased to say that we are beginning to get our act together. There are collaborations beginning to take place. For instance, there's a lady that I work with, and she set up a property investment club so that you no longer need 500,000, 300,000 to buy property. We all just pool money together, just a few thousand together, and buy properties, that kind of thing, and it's working very well. I know she's not the only one, but that's the one I can speak of. And can I just say to our listeners, if you do want information about that, please just drop us an email or something, and I can hook you up with that lady. We've had her on the show before, but even that, there does still need to be a mindset shift. We were having a discussion the other day, and there was a particular lady who was asked to pay towards joining a property investment club, and she didn't understand the reason why she had to pay to join. She seemed to think that she was doing the members of that group a favor by becoming a member of the group. She didn't see it as the reverse, that actually they were providing an avenue for you to buy property that you couldn't hitherto afford, and grow your wealth and secure the financial future of your children. She didn't see it. So again, like you said, that mindset has got to change. It really has, if we're going to make any progress in this area. Sonny, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes, Remy and Bebe, I mean, these are some serious points. Let me tell you what changed my life and my wife's life. You know what? One day I just looked at my income. I'm like, the way I'm going, I mean, this is going to be broke. I mean, I'm like, this is a joke. I just got tired. And there's a saying that goes like, it said, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd gone through 2018, it was just, but you know something, I just began to ask myself, what do I need to do to start earning 100,000 a year? I just began to ask myself then that, and that's how I got into this business. One day I went out and I saw a client outside London, and I sat with him for 3 hours. And I looked at how much I generated in income, about £3,000. I said, you know something? It just, in a matter of months, it just took a while. I have left what I used to do. I used to lecture. I got tired of all the appraisals, of all the observations. And it is headed by, I'm so sorry, Caucasian. I just got tired. And then I began to say, you know what, I'm going to do this because if I work hard and I do what I'm supposed to do, I could earn 8,000, 10,000 a month. The reason is, okay, fine. We want to buy a house, we want to do this. This is the kind of money to put aside. You understand? So there needs to be a mind shift. There needs to be a mindset shift, and there needs to be action. So once you are ready, life will test you. We all know this. Once you are ready, let me tell you, once I decided, in fact, it was a few days, I went to the dry cleaner, met this person, and I started making inquiries. Within the next week, I was on to this course for 5 days. Guess what? I lost 1 week's wages. You understand? Some people, they don't want to look that. I'm like, okay, fine. I was not paid for a week, but I've not looked back since. So there needs to be this radical mind shift, and then you now need to follow up with action, and then you now need to have a group. People like Remy, people like Bebe, we are talking about these things, who now support your mentality. You understand? Yeah. Because let me tell you, Jim Rohn said, that profits are better than wages. With wages, you make a living. With profits, you can make a fortune. And the work ethic is, my MD, is Ralph Motlock. He's a multi-millionaire. Yes. My immediate director on top of me, he's a millionaire. So guess what? Within 3 months, my income jumped. I doubled my income.
So yeah.
Can you see? Can you see?
So there has to be a mind shift. We have to move away from the kind of life that we're living. Remy said something. She said some appearances. That's basically what she was saying. That rather than have the appearance of wealth, let's go after measures that actually make us wealthy. And there's a huge difference between that. A huge difference. Too many of us are focused on the money, and we think that equates to wealth. The appearance of wealth and actual wealth are two completely different things. Okay, guys, well, I'm going to round it up in a minute, but I just want to quickly ask about something that is quite personal to me. Now, I have shared this before. We have a child with autism, and for some reason, again, just like COVID has affected the Black community disproportionately, for some reason there are a lot of children there's a disproportionate number of children with learning disabilities within the Black community. Remy, in a very quick amount of time, can you tell us what can be done to protect the interests of our children with learning difficulties?
Again, it comes down to trust. And what's wonderful is that HMRC recognize the importance of providing for people with disabilities. So if you use a trust, you won't affect, very often there are benefits being claimed and being paid. You won't affect the benefits. You won't affect, you won't have, you get inheritance tax is much more favorable. Capital gains tax, much more favorable. Income tax, much more favorable. So all around, for vulnerable beneficiaries or people with disabilities, trusts are really the way to go.
Okay, so you heard it here. The buzzword for the day is trusts. So you need to get some more information about that. Okay, guys, just before you go, can you very, very quickly tell us where we can find you? Is there anything that you're doing that our listeners need to know about? Any programs coming up? Sydney?
Yeah, if you can find me on LinkedIn, if you go to LinkedIn and type in Sydney Sunny, I think I'm the only Sydney Sunny in the world. If you type in Sydney Sunny, yes, you will find me on LinkedIn. Send me a message, send me a line. I'll get in touch with you, and then we can talk.
Okay.
That's yes.
Okay.
And for me, you can get me on or connect with me on Instagram, on Facebook at The Wills Lawyer. And of course my name Remy Ayala on LinkedIn, and also please have a look on amazon.co.uk for my book called Making a Will. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this informative. I can't thank my guests enough. It has been really, really good. I'm really pleased that you guys came along. Thank you for taking the time. I know how busy you are. It's your girl, Bebe Clement. I want to thank you once again for listening, and we'll be here again, same time next week. In the meantime, as I always say, don't let life dictate to you. Rather, put your signature on life. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Hi everyone, it's your girl Bebe Clement, the author of How to Go from Employee to Entrepreneur, and the host of your weekly business show, Bebe Means Business, the show where we discuss everything you ever wanted to know about business but you were afraid to ask. How do I